Welcome to the Green Eyed Girl podcast. If this is the first episode you're tuning into, I hope you watched my intro where I said that I was at some point going to talk about politics. This is the Green Eyed Girl political hellscape. All right. Today is going to be my big, scary rundown on how I've plotted the death of America, essentially. And I'm hoping we're in the midst of this not actually happening. I'm hoping that we just avoided all chaos. Though I don't think there's avoiding all chaos, I do still think that there's a deep state and all kinds of things that have to be fixed. However, I'm odd. I studied history. I studied a lot of history. And I have been very upset to find out that most of it has been wrong. Many things that I thought were true, that I'd read in multiple sources, have been completely debunked in my world in this last year. And let me tell you, it rocked it just a little bit. But I've always been someone who just had a sense of needing to think of how the US could come to an end, because we are a world superpower. I don't think we are the reigning superpower right now. I'm hoping we're on our way back to it. But it's always been one of those things that rattles around in my head of, okay, how do you take America? We're huge. There's lots of guns. There's lots of people with guns, etc. Our landscape is something to overcome, etc. So I thought, all right, you can't just come sailing here on the east or west coast. We're going to see you coming from a million miles away. You try to come down through Canada. I'm sorry, those northern states, they're built a little different. You probably won't get your army through them. They hunt. They are outdoorsmen, and they're a little brutal because they have to deal with the winter, so good luck. You could come in through Mexico, but then you're dealing with, Texas. I wouldn't want to come through Texas. If we're actually like locking down our border and you're actually trying to invade our country, nope, not going through Texas. There's a lot of gun owners down there, and there's several other states, but man, those border states, again, kind of like the North, built different. Not afraid to shoot anybody, not afraid to gunsling, whatever. You're probably not going to make it out. And even if you do start making it through, I mean, you hit the Midwest, and we're crazy here too. So it's just difficult. It's not something that's easy. You'd have to knock out all communications, somehow avoid the military, etc. So if you look at all the direct invasions, they're not simple. You have to corrupt from within, which is exactly what's been happening for decades. We're actually coming pretty close to pushing probably a century of the corruption from within. And even the communists back in the day actually said that America would fall from within because they were going to come through. Funny story, that's exactly what they've done. So we have to watch the people that are in charge. So the way the US is set up, I hate... All right, the way the US is set up, our leadership, I'm going to put that air quote, leadership, they're not actually your leaders. They're supposed to be your representatives. They're supposed to go and represent your interest in office. So when you send someone from your county to the state, they are to be the representation of your county that you live in to the state. We're basically mini nations. So you democratically should be electing someone who represents your interests, who's like you. So the person who sits there if the majority of the people who are around you are farmers, the vast majority of your county is a bunch of farmers, why are you sending a lawyer to represent you? That doesn't make any logical sense, because how can they represent you if their interests aren't aligned with yours? So when you go to the federal, you should be selecting a representative of someone who represents your state on the whole. But again, we've gotten into this horrible situation of having been invaded. So we end up with all of these lawyers and high-powered, qualified people who are going, oh, they study political science. Who cares? Who cares? Are they representing your interest? Are you looking at how the people you elected are voting on your behalf? They aren't your leaders. You're not sending them there to dictate to you how you're supposed to live. You're supposed to be sending them there to represent your interest, to do what is in your best interest as a state. So the United States is essentially 50 independent nations who all signed a contract called the Constitution and have agreed that, hey, we should all be unified because this is the law of the land, the Constitution. And you should be sending a representative from your state to go represent your interests, to coordinate with the other states so that your interest is represented, their interest is represented. And California and Tennessee can be different, and Kentucky and New York can be different, and Michigan's different than Texas. They shouldn't get to control everything from one big epicenter because they're special, or they have more business, or whatever. You send your representative to make sure that your best interest is being taken into account as a state on a national level, and from your county on a state level, and from your farm to your magistrate. That's how this breaks down. Unfortunately, we've started looking at this and looking at these people as our leaders. Well, we're sending them to lead us. No, time out. No. This is America. The Constitution, the great thing about the Constitution is that it actually gives you, or it nets out the freedoms that they aren't allowed to take away from you. You're supposed to be leading yourself. You should be governing yourself. If you're not, that's why we have police forces. But we've gotten to a point where it's a nanny state because we all act like a bunch of children, and we elect our leaders to go and tell us how to behave. I'm an adult. I'm sorry. I don't need you to tell me how to behave. I'm going to behave. There are some people who can't, and my favorite representation for this is the shopping cart. There's no consequences if you don't return your shopping cart. Nobody's going to come, haul you off, etc. The people who return their shopping carts all the time, barring massive car accident, you absolutely have to throw the groceries in and you're gone. Barring extreme circumstance, the people who return their carts, they're self-governing. They don't need the police force to come and tell them what to do and what not to do. They're looking out for the interest of their neighbor. They're returning the shopping cart so it doesn't plow into someone else's car when the wind blows, etc. It's the people who don't return their shopping cart that are just absolute animals. And they have to have force, and they have to have fear, and they have to have consequences to do what is right with their fellow man. And we've become an entire country that get treated like that, that behave and allow our representatives to become our leaders. Because we feel that we have to be herded like cattle. We're not. Grow up. Self-govern. Return your shopping cart. It's the little things that make it the big things. So we've gotten down this track, and I'll delve further into those things, I'm sure, at another time, because I really never shut up about this stuff. But we've gotten ourselves to the point where we've started looking at these people as our leaders instead of our representatives. And we send them there, and we're just like, well, they told us we had to do it, and they've been there forever, so they know what's best for us, I guess. They don't. But we've allowed that attitude to completely invade our governing. In doing so, we actually let the communists come in and start dictating our lives. So that's the first thing we did. We handed our representative power over to leadership instead, and we've lost our voice in it. Because if you don't send someone who's actually representing your interest up there, you're just sending like the best of the worst to represent you because, well, everybody else got attacked by the media. And now we live in a culture where you can't send a representative because, well, they're going to get torn apart by the media. And we really want someone, hey, we're a giant farm community and we really want someone to go represent our farm community. But the media is going to be so hard on them and the opponent's going to be so hard on them that they don't want to do it because it's going to destroy their entire life. That's insane. Okay, outright insane. So we've given all of our power over to these people. We've decided that they're our leaders instead of our representatives. And so they're operating in their best interest. They're making a ton of freaking money, especially at the federal level. I'm talking about the federal level more so than the state level because I don't think states are quite as corrupt. I don't think they're great. The state I live in, personally, I don't think the leadership is that great, but I also don't think they were duly elected. Get into that another time. I think the Dominion voting machines are super, super bad. Again, I'll get into that another time. But on the federal level, we have given all of these people the power to be our leaders instead of our representatives. So they're operating in their best interest, and they really don't give a crap about us. And it's been this way for eons. And then they created all of these departments that micromanage our lives to the point where you can't move, think, breathe without getting some kind of fine or penalty or thrown in jail. And now we have them talking about censorship, which is why I don't think I'm going to last long on YouTube because they do censor. Me and Rumble, we'll get along just fine. Me and X, Elon is the man. YouTube, yeah, they're not going to like me. That's fine. So we've handed all this power to these people. And they're operating and making money off of the backs of us. They've empowered all of these governmental agencies to take away more of our money, to wastefully spend it. We have no idea where our money is going. So we have an absolute corrupt system that hates us. These people hate you. I could probably count on one hand the number of people in politics on a federal level who actually don't hate you on a daily basis. But otherwise, they hate you. They think you're scum. They treat you like a lower class citizen. They call themselves your leader. That should tell you everything you need to know. They hate you. So when you start looking at that and you realize, okay, well, there's one bridge that's fallen. Okay. But still, even if the people that hate you want to come at you, they're going to have to come at you with the military because it's not like they can do it themselves. It's not like they have their own personal army or anything like that. So you start looking at our military. Well, when I was in, I don't know, middle school or high school or so, I remember people that I know going off to the military, and one of the questions that was coming up was, would you be willing to fire upon a United States citizen? And resoundingly, it was offensive to these men that were joining the military because they joined to serve and protect us. They joined to serve and protect the civilians, the people that they love. That's their friends, their families, etc. So it was a resoundingly offensive question, and the vast majority said no. They weren't going to fire upon U.S. citizens, especially on United States soil. That poses a problem for your leaders, because we're an armed populace. And so far, they've not had a lot of luck disarming. The Second Amendment is very clear. It says shall not be infringed upon. So any gun law really should be shot down via the Supreme Court for that, automatic weapons included. I am a staunch Second Amendment person because I don't believe in tyranny. I don't believe in any gun law because any gun law is one step towards tyranny. So schools start getting shot up and these things, and we watch things like Sandy Hook where police stand down. I watched the video. That's insane. Orders came from somewhere, guys. We allowed small children to be killed, and then we're going to sit and blame a gun? No, unacceptable. There's crazy people. There's also the CIA and MK Ultra, and we'll get into that another day too. So there's a lot to this. I'm trying to hit some highlights at the beginning, so at least you know what you're getting into if you start listening to my political cast. But they start trying to take away the guns and slow that down, but they still have the problem of we're not giving them up easily, and the Constitution's really hard to overcome. They still hate us, and they have a military that won't fire upon citizens. So then all of a sudden, you start realizing that they're trying to get more women into the military. And then they want a very dense gay population, transgender population, etc. Now I'll delve into all of those groups. Obviously, I do the Feminist Utopia podcast where I talk about how terrible feminism is all the time on every level. So that one's kind of a given. But the thing about these groups, the women, the gays, the trannies, etc., they view themselves as oppressed in some way, and they're very dangerous groups. Very dangerous. Because they feel that they're a victim somehow, and any bit of violence that they show is just them protecting themselves. So when the COVID vaccine came through and a whole bunch of strong, good men left the military because they didn't want to take an experimental vaccine that could potentially give them heart issues, etc. And then the military started promoting women and gays and trannies and all of these things. No one batted an eye. Well, I mean, some of us did, obviously, but it's not something that's widely talked about. It's not someone that I've even seen some of my favorite podcasters speculate about. Here's my speculation on it. We chose the easily most radicalized groups and promoted them into the military because our leaders hate us and they want to take us down. But good, strong, masculine men will not fire upon citizens. But victims will. Victims absolutely will. These groups don't care about citizens. They care about their rights, which are actually just privileges. So not only does it make our military weaker on a global stage, and we can look at it as, well, this is really not good, and I've heard many podcasters speculate on that, of they're trying to make us weaker so other countries can take us down, etc., etc. I have a much sicker outlook on this because I actually think this is where it stems from. Our leaders hate us, and they want us to continue to be overly taxed, overly financially burdened bank accounts for them to gain from. And when we fight back to that, they need to have a military that's willing to kill those of us who are willing to fight for it, because they can't seem to get our guns away from us. So they make sure that they have a military who's willing to go in and who's willing to shoot us anyway. That's my take on that. So now we have leaders leaders who hate us and a military willing to fire upon us. In the health and fitness, I'll cover at some point the poison food, the poison water, which makes us even weaker, makes us not be able to think as well, etc. So there's that too. So we're a weakened, mostly disorganized group. We've been very privileged for a very long time. So we actually don't have too many active militias. There should be more people active in militias. If you are on the right and you really feel that your rights are being infringed upon, you might start thinking about these things. Not because I want you to go fight now, but I want you to be prepared if they decide to come at you. Because that's a very distinct possibility in the world that we live in. And if you're not seeing that and you think that this is crazy, okay, we just flooded our country with millions of foreigners who don't belong here. And a presidential office allowed it, encouraged it, funded it. And those people are here causing chaos and destruction. Parts of Colorado have been completely taken over. We have Laken Riley just got brutally killed, and we're not even putting the guy who did it on a death penalty list. Instead, we get to pay for him to be in prison for the rest of his life, despite the fact that he tried to rape and when he was unsuccessful, killed a woman brutally. And the government flew him around this country on your dollar. And now he gets to continue living off of your dollar. So they brought in an entire army to cause chaos. Unmitigated chaos. And they put them mostly in swing states. Elon Musk was absolutely right when he said this would have been the last actual Democratic election. And it's because they were flooding these people into swing states on a scale I didn't even realize until I started looking into it after I heard that from Elon. And then I started looking into it and found that it was true. So they brought in an army of chaos agents, because the more chaotic your area is, the less you're going to be paying attention on a national scale. And then on the national scale, when all of a sudden you're just being outvoted and your leaders aren't representing your interest in any way because you've decided that they're leaders instead of your representatives, and they're doing nothing but taking money from you and letting your family starve while giving privileges to others, the minute you revolt, they have an army who's willing to kill you. We are this close. This close. And that's not even counting the CIA and everything else that is just an unmitigated nightmare as well. But we are this close to the end of America. And that's something I didn't ever think I would see in my lifetime. Ever. But we're right there teetering on that edge. The bright side is Trump got elected. And by all accounts, from what I can see, he is finally going to go in and he's going to clean house. And they're trying to start World War III to give more distractions to him so that in the first 2 years, while we hold the House and the Senate, he has to deal with a war instead of cleaning house and draining the swamp. It's got to go. The bureaucratic overreach into your everyday life is astronomical and unacceptable. It needs to go. But the attitude of, well, they'll handle the military and we're just making them weak. No, it's got to end. The military needs to be rebuilt from the ground up with true, strong, masculine men. The kind of men who want to stand in front of their wives and take a bullet because they're not going to let their wife die. The men who have something to fight for, who believe in truth and justice and protecting the people that they love. And we shouldn't needlessly ship those men off to someone else's country. Those are our men. And we have to stop referring to these people as our leaders. They're not. The people you should be electing are the people who should be going to represent your interest. If the person sitting in Washington, D.C. right now doesn't represent your interest and you just voted for him because it was the better of two options, start a recall petition. Let's change the landscape of politics. Let's put in some term limits. Because if there's term limits, then there's no point in shredding someone's entire life and destroying their entire life just because they want to go and represent someone's interest. Just because they want to go and care about their neighbors. If you have term limits, there's not a point in running it down because it's no longer a career, which it should never have been a career. And they certainly shouldn't be getting paid for life and having benefits for life. That's outright absurd. None of us, none of the rest of us who work every day to provide for our families just have money for life because we've gone and done something one time. This is supposed to be a sacrifice. This is supposed to be a sacrifice by someone who cares so much about their county, about their state, about their area, about the people who they live around, that they're willing to go sacrifice 2, 4, maybe 6 years of their lives. I'd say at max 8. I don't think you should do anything more than 8 personally. I think anything beyond that, you are taking advantage of people, really and truly. But it was supposed to be people who were willing to make the temporary sacrifice to go do what's best for their loved ones, for their neighbor, for their community, for their state. And we need to get back to that. We need to realize that as a society, we are literally teetering on the brink of political destruction. That the IRS can dig into every aspect of every single dollar that has ever hit your bank account, to the point where they want to see what your credit card transactions are, what your Venmo transactions are, anything over $600, they want to rip you apart for. If you make $1 that's unaccounted for that they didn't get to tax, they want to dig into your entire life. But we have entire departmental agencies that lose billions of our dollars. They're not government dollars. They were taken from your paycheck in one way or another. They're taking your dollars and they're throwing them away, and they won't even give you an accounting for it. And they just go, well, we'll try better next year. And they don't. And they don't. Elect better people. What better? Stop looking at these people as your leaders. They're not. They're called representatives. And they're called that for a reason. Maybe start ignoring something that they may have done in the past that's a problem. Start putting people in who want to actually vote for term limits because they actually think that's what's best for people. And then, worst case, you've had someone there that you thought was going to represent your interest, and they're only allowed to be there for X amount of years. And after that, there's no benefits to it. So if you make a mistake and somebody's there that really sucks, well, at least they can't make a career out of it. But most of these people have made a career off of it. And it's pathetic. And it's sad. The death of America is teetering right now. And we need to start making better decisions as individuals and as neighborhoods and as groups so that we have a better future. We don't have to 100% agree on everything as a nation. We don't have to 100% agree on everything as a state. We don't have to agree on everything as a county. But I'm willing to bet the people you live next door to, you have a lot in common with. Choose the people to represent your interest on the whole in groups, all the way out to the federal. Because Kentucky and California don't have to have the same ideological life. And the Fed shouldn't control everything. They should control just a little bit, just enough that as states we can all coexist as a group. But you get to choose the state you live in. So if you don't like the state that you're in, go to a different one. If you believe more of what happens in middle America somewhere than on a coast, then go there. If you want things that are offered on a coast, go there instead. But let's stop trying to force the Fed to make us all the same, because we're not. And we never should be. We need to care more about our freedom than about our safety. And we need to care more about our personal interests as we send someone forth to represent us. Let's stop the death of America and try to rebound before we are Rome. I'll have more on some political hellscape coming later, because I have endless diatribes on this nonsense. So that was the Green Egg Girl podcast.